I also work with other industries, pharma, digital, medtech, sports, academia, and latterly, from the pandemic struck, I went into King's Hospital in London, working full-time for free for about 6 months there as Deputy Chief Exec to help with the pandemic, and now still do a day a week. So very much still abreast of the operational issues. And as I say, thank you. I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, and last but by no means least, Liz, what's your name and where do you come from?
So I'm Liz, come from Huddersfield actually. So I've been independent for about 6 months as a consultant, coach and business advisor. I'm also a non-exec director for Health Education England. I started my career in local government and I did 17 years mainly in frontline services and running customer services to make sure the experience was good, either face-to-face, telephone or digital. I came into the NHS in the early 2000s. I did 3 HR director roles. I was a trust chief exec, and I was also the chief exec of an academic health science network, which is industry, NHS, local government, and universities coming together to deploy innovation and technology. My final full-time job was at Leeds Academic Health Partnership, similar sort of partnership, but with more voluntary sector organisations in there as well, to look at how we could support systems, introduce innovation, and look at how we use digital to support our workforce.
Great.
That's me, Nikki.
Thank you. Thank you to the panel. So as I say, I want this session to be interactive in that we want you to ask questions, make comments. If you want to use the chat facility, please do that. I can see that some of you have already started using that around having trouble with sound, recording, etc. So please put comments. I'll keep an eye on what's coming up in there in terms of questions or comments. That'd be really helpful. I may ask you to come into the room, as in come off mute and ask the question to the panel, just so we get more interaction and different voices other than our own, because that's sometimes quite helpful. Okay, so well, let's get going. So the first, it's quite nice to see we've got a diverse audience. So I can see Gareth, who's from our Welsh branch at HPMA, so UK representation, which is helpful. So first question to the panel is really to set some context. So before I do that, I think it's important that we acknowledge that there has been some significant work done nationally across the UK in relation to where people professionals sit, what the priorities are. We've got obviously the 4 nations have got a workforce strategy, people plan, whatever it's named in the various nations, which talks very much about the way forward for the profession. Now, one of those dynamics is digital, and digital can mean different things to different people. And what we're going to talk about today is, where are we as professionals in the people professional with digital? What is it we can do to really embed digital in everything that we do? So it's quite interesting that Helen's put in the chat about taking digital notes. That's one aspect of. Somebody said to me the other day, they've got a notepad that they write on as if it's a writing pad, but it's actually digital, and then it transfers it into something majorly amazing. So I need to get myself back into more digital. So let's look at what our role is as people professionals in embracing the digital world, and what does that actually mean. So I'm going to go to the panel. I think I'll come to you first, Mike, if that's okay. Just in terms of the futures paper, which is the NHS England document that did a futures review of HR and OD. Just really interested in what your initial reaction is to that document, that paper.
Yeah. Thanks, Nikki. I mean, the first thing to say is, this shouldn't be a revolutionary idea that we have a recognition at national level of, the fact that we need a piece of work which describes and tries to help support the development of people. The NHS is completely dependent on its people. It's a people business. Even if you're a finance director, 64 pence out of every pound we spend is on our wage bill, because that's what we are. And people make a huge difference. So the idea, if you like, that you know, a people strategy or a description of how we can try and facilitate great experience as a staff member and help people be as good as they can be, you know, shouldn't be a revolutionary idea. It should be what we've always had and what we've always lived with. And so I think the first thing is to recognise what an important document it is. And I think it's also hugely important because we've tended to think quite mechanically about workforce. You know, it's about workforce planning, having supply to meet demand. And of course, what this does really is I think it takes you in through its 8 dimensions into, you know, seeing people genuinely in all their glory, their own well-being, which we've had to sort of like really focus on through COVID. You know, the way in which we develop talent, the way in which we're inclusive or not, sadly, in some cases. All of those things really should be the beating heart of how the NHS operates. And sadly, what we get in planning priorities guidance is, you know, if the mechanics of delivery, the targets, the money, you know, and I'm not saying they are not important, they are hugely important. But if you really want to get productivity, you know, you can put your software in and all the rest of it for theatre productivity, but actually how our people feel and are developed and are able to deliver their talents is going to give you much greater productivity than almost any other weapon you've got in the armoury. So the elective care recovery is all about people, you know, sort of dealing with health inequalities is all about people. So I think this is a hugely important document, and I really welcomed it because it really sort of tried to embrace all those characteristics of what it takes to be a member of a big family of the NHS workforce. And I think it was long overdue in that form, and I really welcomed it. I mean, implementation, will come on to that, and the role of digital. I want to say a lot about that at some point, but you know, I just think it is a really important document.
Thanks, Mike. That's really helpful in setting some of the context about where this sits with the bigger picture. Liz, what's your reaction to the Futures Review?
Yeah, so thanks, Nikki, and like Mike, really welcome this review. And when I describe my sort of career, it's been, the first part of my career was about customer experience, helping people who are in council, sometimes in poverty. And the NHS is all about customer experience, isn't it? If we haven't got staff coming in who feel positive to come to work, want to leap out of bed to get there because they're seeing the colleagues in a great environment, they're not going to be able to give a great service user, patient, customer experience. So I think the paper's really welcome that we want our staff to be enjoying work, we want them to have good health, we want as a profession to be supporting them to do that and to be thinking about that. And I think the paper does help us to do that. But we also want them to give a really good customer experience. And part of it is about harnessing the talents of those people. So as a people profession, how do we support a culture that allows people to express their talents? And we only get to know what those talents are if we're treating them as a whole person, coming into work, looking at their needs, their wants, the things that they can do well, how they can work with colleagues, and supporting them to do that. And I do think the paper brings that out, talking about creating that great employee experience. How do we as a profession do that? And how do we enable managers and staff that work with our people to do that? And I do think the section in it about inclusion and belonging is really important. And as a people profession, have we got the data to make sure that we're including everyone, that they're getting the same learning and development opportunities, that we treat them as a whole person with their experiences, we bring that to work and we support them. So I do think it draws out key points that we as a profession can work with and help the end user. And I think the digitally enabled solution bit of it is great, actually. So how do we help people to do things more efficiently, give them more time back if they're caring? How do we give them more time back to care through using digital? But also really importantly in that is how do we skill them up so that they feel confident with digital, they feel enabled to use it, and then they pass that on to the people that we see in the service as well to help them in their everyday lives. So I think really important paper, really welcome, and I think hopefully moves the culture forward in the services that we're working with.
Thank you, Liz. Just for information, Andy's put the actual link to the paper if you wanted to see it, if you haven't seen it already, you want your own copy. So Liz made a really important point around the importance of data. So Ray, just considering that our expectation is that patients have more access to information, more digital world in terms of, and that can be fortuitous, it can also raise initial concerns as well. So just wondering in terms of your reaction to the features review, but in the context of that digital world that we're emerging into.
Yeah, you've actually stolen my first bullet point, Nikki, which is the comment that, you know, digital isn't new to the NHS. From the days of Jeremy Hunt, Matt Hancock, remember them? And now latterly, Sajid Javid have all talked about empowering patients to own their own healthcare. By the way, we're all patients on this, which I personally welcome. You know, I want that opportunity. And the NHS, quite rightly, has pursued that as a priority. And you will all be aware of the EPR drive, patient record drive. My view on this is, in terms of it being a staff digital piece, we really don't want to get left behind on this. In the same way data, if you're doing it with patients, can drive better outcomes, surely the same applies to staff. So we shouldn't lose out on the digital agenda. The other thing I'll say about the paper is, taking a step back for a second, I was really encouraged about how the paper was arrived at. So to give a shout out to a really great digital company out there, which I'm not affiliated to in any way, just to be clear, but Clever Together are a kind of crowdsourcing big conversation digital piece. The guys used and worked with Clever Together to reach out to, and I'm sure maybe get some nods around the room. I'm sure some people on this call inputted, were asked for their opinion to form that paper. But then they took a digital jump to manufacture the paper and arrive at what it was. I think if you delve into the paper, there's a couple of bits. Liz has already alluded to the inclusion piece, which is huge. I think data can give you that. I think there's a bit in the paper as well around us being innovative as a HR and OD function. And if we're not doing digital then and leading by example, then I think we're missing a gap. But the other thing we're missing by maybe not doing that is, if you go back to the days of David Ulrich, I know he's still around and I respect him a lot, but when Ulrich came out with the HR business partner model and HR being a forerunner in the business, I think the data that you can derive from digital really puts us at the table, because you'll then have real-time digital data about the workforce. I always call it the Harry Potter map. Everybody seen Harry Potter? When you open the map, you see the footprints walking around the map. Imagine that in a digital sense, so you can see where your people were, not geographically, but in terms of performance and gaps and opportunity. If you have that as an OD, HR, workforce people, you've got a place at the table, because your exec colleagues should really be interested in that, because you've got insight that they don't have. And if you think data isn't powerful, just look at what Facebook does with it, and Twitter and others. And I think I'll finish on my delight of the paper by reinforcing, I think it was Liz's point, and you know, paraphrasing the old Richard Branson classic, but if you want to treat your customers well, treat your staff well first. And what I really want us to do as a profession is grab hold of the digital journey, so we don't become the cobbler's children. You know, the cobbler's children that don't have got tatty shoes, because the cobbler's always working on somebody else's shoes. But if we're working on the patient digital aspect, absolutely we should be. But as people and workforce and HROD professionals, we should really be pushing the envelope on digital for us as a profession too.
Thanks, Ray. I'm going to stay with you, Ray, just for the next question to understand, you know, where are we as people professionals, HROD and the rest of the workforce people profession, where are we with data? What's our relationship? How do you think we use it effectively? Is there things we can do better? What's your view?
Yeah, I think, well, data is huge, isn't it? And as much as how you interpret data, feedback is data. It could be vocal, it could be written, it could be numerical, data could come in all shapes and sizes. I think from my time in the NHS and before in government and banking actually, but always in a HR and OD profession, I think one of the things that I've noticed is we inherit data. We inherit data from other sources and kind of try and compile it ourselves to make sense of our world. Quite often we'll do that with data. I think the key thing about the data we could aspire to achieve is the difference that would make, because currently some of the clients that we work with across the country are using paper and spreadsheets, and that's data, but it's not quick enough and not accessible enough to keep up with the pace of the NHS and the changes that we make. So we're in a very different place depending on which trust, which ICS, which part of the country, which part of the UK, I'm sure. And You know, I plead the fifth in terms of Scotland and Wales. I wouldn't claim to be expert in those areas. But it's different across the patch. I think what digital allows us to do is level playing fields relatively quickly. And when you look at system aspect of where we're going, ICSs and care providers, we have the opportunity to level people data across a patch. And while CQC are moving towards measuring organizations on how collaborative they're being, if you think about data across a patch for talent, learning needs analysis, performance, succession planning, this should help drive efficiencies out of the system. And I'm sure we'll move on later in the conversation to the Chancellor of the Exchequer's spring statement tomorrow and what that will mean in terms of efficiencies for the NHS. But this can all help us drive towards those things. So in short, data is different across the place. Digital has an opportunity to go level up over in the space of a couple of years. We could really level up across the patch.
Nikki, can I come in on Ray's point there?
Yeah, sure.
Because, there's a couple of things I would add to Ray's point, and Ray's points are absolutely spot on. You know, when you look at health systems or places across the world that are really doing well, they are using data in a very different way. I mean, basically, they are enabled by data. They don't just congratulate themselves on they can give you a point in time readout, which is kind of where the NHS sees state of the art at the moment. Is we can tell you what's happening today. We think we're doing well with data. What they're doing is they're using that data, looking at trends, and they're using that to predict and prevent problems. So they see inequality in workforce before, so they can really tackle it. They understand if they've got people leaving from particular divisions or whatever, and then they can unpick, well, what's going on? Why are we seeing a high turnover? Is it just chance, or is it a fact that something's going wrong there? So they're using data really in a very powerful way to manage their business. And the NHS is just content to fly blind. You know, I do such a lot of board development, and I say to boards, you know, so what data do you have that gives you insights into this? And that they have a paucity of data. They make decisions which are organisational changing decisions on investments, on priorities, with very, very little information behind them. And the thing about digital is that it allows you to do what we've always struggled with, which is to collect data quickly, efficiently, cheaply, once you've made the outlay for your system, you know, and the analytical tools are there in the software now. So you can really massively boost your ability to lead organizations, whether you're in the middle of the organization, the top of the organization. Data gives you so much kind of understanding. And you know, we're now working in systems where people are trying to work in provider collaboratives. They're trying to work in, you know, with local authority colleagues, and everybody bemoans. And I get asked to come in and do a lot of work around behaviours. And people say, oh, you know, they don't trust each other, and they'll say one thing and do another. And the truth is that half the time that happens because people have got a partial view of the system. So when they look at their data, they come up to the collective table with their chief exec colleagues or whatever, and they say, well, my workforce shortage is terrible. So I'm the person or the organisation that really needs the priority here. And as soon as you put together the workforce data for the whole sector, you realise actually the workforce shortage in general practice or in social care is a greater problem. And because of that problem, it's creating my pressure, which means that I can't cope with the workforce I've got. And that's all of a sudden, you now have a big picture because you've brought data together. And we couldn't do that 30 years ago when I first started because you had to do everything manual. The point about digital is it now brings that facility for you to share data. And this really is you know, as much as there's a magic bullet on any of our stuff that we have to deal with, this is as close as it gets. Using data, generating data digitally, this is, and particularly about your workforce in all those aspects that the Futures paper goes into about your culture. Boards talk a lot about, you know, we're really bothered about our culture. So, well, how do you assess that? What data do you have? They have nothing. They just have instinct. They have an annual staff survey that tells them something, and then 12 months later and retrospectively, they think they understand what's going on in their organisation. You know, we really have been so content to fly blind, and this has got to change.
Nikki, can I come in on that? And just there's a few questions in the chat. So just a bit, I absolutely agree with what Mike said. And coming back to your question about HR professionals, you know, do we do well with digital? So I work with a few organisations. In one organisation, I was supporting the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian, and they'd had lots of I don't know if it's complaints, but contacted the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian about promotions for people from BAME backgrounds. And when we looked at that, the complaint was absolutely relevant. When we looked at how many applicants it had, how many interviews, how many people had got promoted. And if they'd have looked at the data and been able to cut that data to get those stats, they could have probably avoided that issue, but they hadn't sort of thought about how they cut the data. So all the data was there, but in sort of the people profession, they hadn't thought about what data do we need, how do we cut that, what data permissions do we need. So there's something about setting your systems up well. And I think part of that was about not having confidence or not having the knowledge to know about how you need to get the data out of systems and what permissions you need to go in there. So it was flagged as an issue, and then there was a case to the board. Somebody's asked about how do I make this case. If you've got an issue flagging, you can prevent that issue happening in future. That's just a really sort of practical example. But I do think it is sometimes difficult to feel confident as a non-IT professional to ask for what you want. So I would say go and sit down with your IT people and say, right, this is the data I need, this is how I need to cut it, what do I need, what permissions do I need, how do I put that into the system, have some case studies about where having the right data would have made a difference or avoided a problem that you can see sort of with your workforce. And my son's, just a little tip, my son's an IT professional and he works on the help desk, and he always says to me, oh mum, the IT person's alumni, and say, oh, that's really difficult, it's going to take ages. And he said, don't take any notice of that, just plough on and say, right, can you advise me on what I need to do? Because he has a particular view about IT help desk, but he said, just plough on, ask for what you want, keep on asking, and then go to your profession and say, we would have solved this problem if we'd have had this data.
Mind if I jump in, Nikki? I just want to pick up on
sure.
Sorry to cut across you. Just two very quick points on what both Mike and Liz said. The first thing about where the data comes from digital, I just want to be clear that with it being a digital piece, it can come from, pardon the pun, the horse's mouth. It can engage every single member of the staff by them inputting the data as part of their performance regime, as part of their ongoing coaching or coached regime, as part of their day-to-day life of performance management. We've always said the holy grail would be if managers and staff out there had enough data in order to do the stuff out there, rather than coming back to a big function like HR and OD, us skimming data and doing stuff and then going back. It needs to be an iterative flowing process. Digital allows us to position for staff and managers both interactions with platforms and the data that provides staying there, as well as that collative data, collating at a top level for an organization or a system like an ICS. So it's the old adage of nothing about me without me. This is a cultural thing. It's flipping it from an adult-child relationship. Some people know about this kind of model, but the adult-child relationship of manager-staff into an adult relationship of I'm owning my performance. How can you help me? Well, I'm your coach and manager. That's my job. It's got lots of connotations in terms of cultural shift. So engaging staff through digital means it's nothing about them without them, which gives you some very interesting data, I can tell you.
There's some comments in the chat agreeing with that around that culture is instinct, and people can manipulate it sometimes in terms of hearing what they want to hear to manipulate it. So thanks for that comment, Nazir. I'm going to go back to Gareth. So I don't know if Gareth's here to sort of come into the room and just sort of ask the question. If we go to Mike to answer the question first, but Gareth, do you want to come in if you can and just give some background to your question?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah, my video for some reason isn't coming on, so it's not actually working. So
right,
can't get it on. Okay. In terms of our organisation, we're more of a support organisation in terms of NHS Wales, but the amount of data we hold, not just on employees, but on our customers, i.e. the health boards across Wales, and that could be, from employee data to finance data, accounts payable, etc., is phenomenal, really. And we know we need to move to more of a digital approach. But even a shift to get from a telephone approach to a more customer-centric digital solution is really difficult to persuade the finance and chief exec directors to make that change. Have you got any tips around how would you make that shift? Because it is an investment and it is a bit of a leap of faith up front, because what we do know is we can't continue to throw more people at it because we just won't be able to afford it. But it's then, how do you build that business case that is overarching and convincing to get the data argument over the line?
Thanks, Gareth. If we come to Mike first and get your response, and then ask
Yeah. So you've brought to mind, Gareth, and the realities of life, isn't it? I did a piece of work actually when I was chief executive of the NHS Confed at Jeremy Hunt's behest, which I led a piece of work, and periodically the NHS does this, probably about once every 5 years, which has these kind of bureaucracy reviews, and how do we reduce bureaucracy and reporting and red tape and avoid the duplication of reporting, etc. And what we were able to do, and we use one of the consultancies to sort of do this in a very, very specific, measured way, is demonstrate that if you are using digital data capture, it has 7 times the efficiency. And that efficiency is in terms of the time that it takes staff to input data. And so the first thing is, at a time when we have significant workforce constraint, we know we have, not just about because of illness and sickness and tiredness and fatigue, but also because the demand will just carry on increasing post-COVID. If you can release, if you like, that time for your staff to be able to do the other jobs that they do, like caring for people and dealing with other patients, then that is a massive win for you. And we were able to demonstrate, and I'll send people somehow the link to this paper because it's still relevant. So that's your starting point in terms of just how long it takes not to have a digital sort of platform for putting data in. Then you say, and what is the value of that? Once you've got it there, and playing back that data on a benchmark basis so that staff can see how they perform. Well, of course, things like GIRFT are based completely on having data that gives you a sense of comparison that allows you to understand how you can improve. So starting with a 7%, a 7-to-1 ratio of benefits, you then start to multiply that because you use the data in a very easy way to give people benchmarkable data so they understand their practice. Most data, by the way, only feeds up. It doesn't come back to staff so they can understand. And the more you feed it back to staff and they can see the value of it, the more it improves service redesign, etc., and improvement. So you get even more value. And so these things compound each other in terms of value as you sort of move forward. So digital capture. And of course, the final bit, if people are really worried about this, is, really oppositional to this, is when anybody in a regulatory environment says to you, how do you do your business, particularly if it's on the back of a serious untoward event or some kind of problem, the great thing about digital data is that you have a very clear, accurate record. And this is where, in terms of quality and safety for the people who use our services, and us being a learning organisation, it then multiplies the value even further. So what I think we've got to do is we've got to try and get our finance directors, and I don't want to pillory finance directors because a lot of them are very revolutionary in their own thinking, and sometimes it's the chief exec or whatever who hasn't got the vision. But they need to understand, this is not happening just in healthcare. In fact, healthcare is a slow adopter, I think, of digital technologies. It's happening in every walk of life, because it improves your ability to do the business. And if you can't even get yourself to the sort of fundamentals of this, I would really question whether or not they're the right people, because I can understand someone saying we desperately want to do it, but affordability is an issue. You know, how do we get the payback soon enough? But I think in the report we did for Jeremy Hunt, we said that your 7 times benefit comes back within 12 months. So even within the financial year, you see that benefit. And I'll send that across, and that might be helpful. But I really feel sorry for if you're getting resistance on this point, because every other industry understands this well. And, you know, health and care needs to sort of like come up to speed on this.
Thanks, Mike. Can you remember the name of the document?
I don't. I'll dig it out while we're on the call.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So Liz, Ray, do you have anything to add to that before we move to the next question?
And I just think, to emphasise Mike's final point about regulators, if you're capturing your one-to-ones, your appraisals, your feedback electronically, it's there, isn't it? There's a footprint. You can immediately show that to the regulators that you're looking after staff. If a manager's not picking up on an appraisal or something, you can see that, or if a staff member's not completing that. So I actually think this is really important for the people profession, that we can show that we are giving people development opportunities to run an appraisal. It's digitally recorded. And I think sort of coming back to organisations that have had problems, and they can look at that and say, well, if we'd have been monitoring that and being able to cut data in a certain way, there's probably enough people professionals in HPMA to not to need to have a problem in your own organisation. You could reach, if somebody else has had something, you could use that as an example to say, look, we need to invest because we don't want this to happen, and make a business case around that. And I think this is tricky because no organisations have pots of money sitting around. But as Mike said, if you can show the case for investment after the initial input of monies from capital or revenue, then that can make a powerful business case.
Thanks, Liz. There is some comments in the chat around the system and whether that's an opportunity to look at system-wide investment in commonality of systems.
Yeah.
So Ray, I don't know if you've got a view, or sorry, Liz, go on.
No, Ray, you come in because you look like you were just about to speak and I cut across.
Yeah, I can see the thread of comments coming through mentioning ESR, and it kind of ties in some of the points that I've probably got here. First of all, to go back to the question, how do you get the finance people, you know, involved in this? As somebody who left the NHS to deliver a digital product back where ESR already existed, because it was there when I was there, I've exactly faced exactly the same issue. So it's a very trite example, but whenever I have a challenge from a finance director about the principle of digital, not whether you can afford it or not, we'll get to that, but the principle of digital, I always ask them to comment on the fintech revolution and how now we all have mobile, you know, apps on our phone for banking and stuff, and what their view is from a finance professional point of view about what digital did for the finance profession. It's irrefutable. It's there. We just some finance directors are, dare I say, less energetic towards the digital agenda for whatever reason, but it's not because digital doesn't work. That's an absolute given. The second thing I'll say is, in my time when I left the NHS and started to think about how I do things back with the NHS as a customer, the beautiful thing about digital is it's already got its models and its business models and the ways of working for digital set up. And you've heard all these things before, but it's called agile methodology. And so what their whole principle in life is to build a beta product and fail fast. Let's build a very basic product and fail fast. So in your situation, and I'm not teaching Nansuck eggs, I don't know a great deal about anything, if I'm honest. But if you've got finance data, there are a raft of high quality digital providers who will be very happy to do a very small example of it, fail fast, but then you can extrapolate the results from that, and then that leads into the way that Mike alluded to, and Liz. The final thing I'll say is there was a paper out this week, just in terms of the pace of digital. There's a paper out this week from where was he? Tim Ferris, Director of Transformation at NHSEI, and he made the comment that digital is patchy across the piece, where it's finance, HR, whatever. And he made the astounding observation that only 19% of trusts in England, forgive me, I don't know Scotland, Wales, but in England, are on with an EPR solution. And we've been talking about EPR for many years. So the health system as a whole is kind of wheel spinning a little bit, but I think we're getting more traction as we go.
Thanks, Ray. Okay, so dare I move us on to sort of ESR, because quite a few comments around the ESR in the chat, and obviously it's under review. I'm a lover of ESR, always have been. I think it's a brilliant system if utilised correctly. It's got a lot it can give us, but I think sometimes people get put off by people complaining about accuracy of data. it's, you know, the data is only as good as what information you get to put into a system, like any system you've got. So Ray, I don't know if you've got any views around ESR. Is it fit for purpose? Is it a system that can engage with other systems to really get, I suppose, real life data in the moment rather than waiting for a report to come out at the end of the month?
Thanks, Nikki. Yeah, it might surprise people to know that I've no issue with ESR actually in terms of it being a platform. I think my true experience, my lived experience is when I left the NHS, ESR was looking to improve and do things, and that was 2014. There's always been a kind of, it is coming, it's coming. And, if it does come one day and it delivers what other digital products can do today, I mean, given Nazi's experience, I'm not saying digital is the answer to that, Nazi, and I'm sure everybody on this call will empathise, not sympathise with your situation. We've all, maybe not to your extreme, but we've all had managers like that. Let's call it that. Yeah, but ESR will deliver maybe in the future, but it won't do it today. It won't help people today. So that's the first. And by the way, if ESR under review 2025 allegedly, if it all comes through, and it means organisations like mine are superseded, but to the benefit of the system, happy days. Absolutely fantastic. I'll carry on living through that until somebody shows me ESR does what others can do today, and that's what it is. But credit to ESR, it's managing a very, very large, I think it's the 5th biggest organisation system in the world. Chinese Army, Walmart, Indian Railways, NHS is huge, and it's held it together for a long time through McKesson and now IBM. So fair play. I will say in terms of interoperability, I talk regularly with David Booth, who's the head of integration for ESR, and they've done some good work on, I think I saw in the chat, and I spoke to David about it, the core skills training framework. They've allowed some integration on that. They've allowed some integration on LMSs. So I think ESR could have a really good focal point in terms of data collection, but I do think in terms of the user interface, it's got a long, long way to go. And what I've learned from, I'm a HROD guy who got threw myself into tech. It speaks to Liz's point before. Liz, you mentioned your son on the help desk who said, sometimes it's not as difficult as you make out. It's not as difficult as you make out. Normally, technical skill can get us through these problems in days and weeks. What doesn't make these interoperabilities happen is political will. And that's politics on all sides, not the NHS, ESR. It's a lot of interoperable, different stakeholders with different reasons why they want to interoperate. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing ESR progress over the next 3 and a bit years. But in the time between then and now, again, given the challenges the futures paper set out for the NHS today, I would hope people act sooner than that, even if they just learn from that experience and then drop it to go with ESR. But we'll see.
Thanks for your honesty, Ray. Really helpful. Okay, so Liz, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just sort of briefly. So Ray and I were talking to a trust a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't worked with ESR for quite a long time. I was there when we set it up and got it going, and it gave some good data. And they just described it as a good system, but a bit clunky, which I would agree with, actually. I remember in the days when we were setting it up and getting it running, and it was a bit clunky, and the user interface wasn't that great, and they'd combined it with another system just to give them the data that they wanted. So as Ray said, it is interoperable with other systems. So it's got the basic data there. The data you put in will be as good as the data you get out. But it is a great system, and it covers sort of some of the needs that we have. But I would agree with them that when I worked with it, I did find it a bit clunky. But if you can combine it, you can do great things with that data.
Can I just say one more thing, Nikki? Just a really obvious thing to say. But in terms of the clients that we work with, and I won't name anybody, and I won't go on about our product, but in terms of it, when I left the NHS to do this, we do some of the things that maybe you think ESR would do. But we've grown, and that ESR, as you know, to trusts is free because it's paid by the Department of Health. So it's a free thing for trusts. It doesn't matter their budget. We still have people buying other digital products, paying hard money in austere times because the difference is market. So I would just invite anybody who's looking at ESR, to look at many different digital products and just get your eye on the future. It might help. Who knows?
Yeah, and Angie's kindly put the link of the project manager that's working on it, and there's a number of comments in the chat about how you can get involved, including from Gareth around, I think he's directly involved in the procurement or cited on the programme. So let's fingers crossed that it delivers a better solution and puts Ray out of business in the nicest possible way. Okay, so what I'm keen to move on to now is around you know, what happens if we as people professionals let digital just pass us by? What will happen to us as a profession? What are the impacts of that? You know, how do we sort of work and collaborate? Because if you think about the system working, things are going to change, and digital is an enabler to make that happen. So what if we don't get on the bus, if you like, for want of a better phrase? What if we don't get on the bus as professionals in the people profession with digital? What's the consequence? Mike, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I mean, the truth is that you'll be working harder and getting poorer outcomes as a consequence, because digital largely does two things. One, it creates more efficient ability to work once you've got your inputs there. The very fact that we can have this conversation now with the 40 odd people on this call, if not more. Just think of the travel time that 40 odd of us would have had to have got to a venue, to have sat there. So first off, digital really enables efficiency, and lots of sectors have demonstrated it. But, and I won't rehearse it again, but the great thing about digital is it gives you access to data. And that gives you the ability to have informed work. And if we don't have informed work, then we are making judgments, and we might be brilliant at making judgments. I'm sure lots of people on this call have made judgments all their careers that have proved to be absolutely spot on. But, it's nice to give ourselves a bit more of a safer basis on which to make those decisions. Because the truth is, health services are not pure science where there is a right or wrong answer. What we're doing largely is thinking about priorities, about where we might be using some sense that the microculture on a ward in a hospital, or the inability of a general practice to carry on, or the fact that a care home is going to be understaffed, and therefore some of our relatives are at complete risk on shifts because there's no one there, and there are real consequences of not having sort of like an understanding of how to calibrate. Well, where do we put the resource that we do have to tackle those problems? And sometimes you're trading off, a big problem against a medium-sized problem. It's not that we are able to find solutions. You are just having to make the best judgments without understanding your people, without having that leg of the data. You've probably got some finance information, and you've probably got some service outcomes as judged by national waiting times or whatever. But do you have any sense at all as to what's going on in that service or ward or practice without anything about people? I find it staggering, and so as a consequence, we make poor decisions. And the thing that I meant to say right at the beginning, which I should have said, is that for the fact we are such a strong people business, it has always baffled me why our people directors, our HR and OD people, aren't really executive directors of the organisation. They're always slightly second-class citizens, when actually so much of what they understand, and I would argue that if you put them digitally enabled, they are the cornerstone of how organisations can make smart decisions. So I just think we will be worse as a profession, and sadly, the organisation will be worse as a consequence of you being worse as a profession. And that to me is, why would we back that route? Just doesn't seem to be the right route to go down. And my final point is that there are two barriers to that. One, Gareth raised already, which is persuading others to invest in the digital platforms. And the second is our own willingness to change our own practice, because we've grown up, and most people are quite senior on this call and been fairly successful doing it the way we've always done it. So the second bit is, can we open ourselves up to the opportunity of digital, and change out and challenge ourselves in our own practice?
Thanks, Mike. Really helpful. Liz?
Yeah, so I was going to add to that and just think about our staff, the staff we serve as a people profession. And if I'm a staff member nowadays, I want to book my shift online. I want to fill in my appraisal documentation online. I want to book my one-to-one online. I want to feedback on the manager or do 360-degree feedback with colleagues. I don't want to be filling in paper, and I want to be doing it in my own time on a device of my choosing. So I might be doing it on my smartphone, which is probably what most of us do. So I think as a people profession, if we let that opportunity pass, we're actually letting our workforce down, and we're reducing their flexibilities to do things when they want to do it, how they want to do it, and interact with the organisation, the managers, give feedback on things. So I think it's really important that we do embrace it, and that we give people who have got really busy jobs, really busy, stressful jobs, the ability to do OD, learning and development, appraisals, everything that they might do, come in contact with us for, to be able to do it digitally. And then also, as Mike said, we can cut the data. We can see if we're doing well in terms of EDI, we can see if we're doing well in terms of pay, and we can have a look at what's going on. So I think this is twofold. I think it is the data, but I think it's also creating that culture of flexibility and support for people and helping them to do things in the way they want to do them, which we've now got the opportunity to do because of all the great products and services we've got.
Thanks, Liz. Ray, did you want to come in?
Only briefly to say, if I believe as being part of this profession, if we let it slip us by, Mike's already alluded to the fact that maybe we're a little bit second-class citizen at the top table. The risk is we drift further away and are relied upon just for the compliance, being counting. I'd certainly the skill and employment law and all that kind of stuff, but certainly not the wider spectrum of workforce, OD, development, L&D. We kind of might be parked a little bit. I'll make the quick point around expectations of staff these days and what the demographic of staff profile looks like in the next 10 years. I'm 52 in May, the grey hair proves it, and even I can use digital. The ones that are coming through now, my son's 17, my daughter's Felicity is 13. It's incredible what they do. So their expectation is the old adage of, when I went for a job, they told me to jump and I said, how high? And today they go for a job and you tell them to jump and they say, well, why? And it's that thing around, give me the technology to do my job and I'll stay with you for 3 years if you're lucky. But then this is about me building my career in 3-4 year chunks, not staying with the NHS the rest of my life. Unless we get to our heads around that as a profession, and Generation X and Z and X coming through now, then we've definitely missed the boat, and that's, for me, that's frightening. The final thing I'll say on this is putting our money where our mouth is. We're currently engaged with a university to do a 12-month real-world evaluation on what digital can do for people in the NHS, and that's plotting engagement, performance, empowerment, right through to patient outcomes and experience. So we can see whether this nice, shiny digital product is just nice and shiny and digital and nice to use, or behind the scenes does have an impact on the actual outcomes. So when you're looking at funding gaps and productivity gaps, digital's not about being nice and easy to use. Of course it is, but how is it set up behind the scenes to drive these things? So we're doing a university academic-led 12-month evaluation to prove those path lines. If we can get to that as a profession, then I think we're safe. I think we're good. In fact, I think we're contributing the way anybody responsible for a net spend of 62 pence in the pound in the NHS should be, which is us being looking after the people in the NHS.
Thanks, Ray. So Michael's put in the chat about your point around demographics is spot on. So some really positive feedback for you there, Ray. But I was wondering, in terms of, we're going to have, or we probably have already, 5 generations within our workforce, all very, very different, like you say, in terms of the generations, the baby boomers, etc. So what do we need to do to support our workforce to become more equipped, particularly thinking about, the 5 generations all expecting different things? How do we as a workforce, people, professionals, get the workforce ready for this, for those that perhaps aren't embracing digital? So let's go to Liz.
Thank you. So I think there is something about meeting people where they are. And I think when we first started this, we were talking about people feeling confident to use digital. So I think as a profession, we can help people. We can ask them the question, do you need any learning and development around this? If so, what is it that you need? How can we support you? And really just meet them where they are. So I know some organisations, if people if people need support, they aren't even sort of thinking about digital for the workforce. They're saying, how can we help you to book your next holiday digitally? So you build up some sort of competencies around using digital, and then you start to use them in the workforce. Whereas, as Ray says, we've got the other extreme of young people coming to the workforce who will be telling us what to do. They'll be saying, this is what I want, this is what I need to enhance my working experience. And I think if you're entering into sort of buying a digital platform, looking at what would meet the needs of your workforce, you do need a provider who will respond to those needs that you've got in your organisation. So if something's not right with the system and you think, gosh, I need that changing because my workforce has got X demographic, this needs to be easier, or I need to put this functionality in, you need to be able to go back to that provider and say, can you help me with this? I need this changing, just so that you can serve your particular workforce, because we're all going to have different people within that workforce. And I know a lot of local councils, when I work with councils, they do work around upskilling people digitally. So it may be that you don't have to do it yourself. It may be that they've got something going on that you can say, can I refer somebody to? You can normally do it online and just meet people where they are at whatever stage they're at. Because some people will be daunted by this and others will just embrace it and run with it.
Yeah, I can't just coming in on that point. I mean, yes, we do have 5 generations, but actually, isn't this a core skill? Isn't this mission critical? And of course, you know, most of us have sort of like seen a digital revolution throughout our careers, and it started with a small group of people who understood it. And then as society, we've begun to embrace it, and then we get to the top. But you know, and I know this is a silly anecdote, but you do still come across people who are in leadership roles who are saying, you know, I'm no good at this. You know, I don't do this, and somebody does it for me, and they wouldn't say that about a balance sheet. You know, you wouldn't have a chief exec proudly saying, well, I can't do anything digital, or I don't look at the data, you know, or I don't understand the spread. You know, it seems crazy that you can have top of the office and, you know, still saying things like that. And I think there is a real responsibility on organizational leaders currently, you know, particularly boards, saying, you know, we have a high expectation here of ourselves, and we've invested in this. I mean, you know, I think Guy's and Thomas's Kings, where I've been working recently, they're about to spend about 400 million on putting Epic across their systems, you know, with all the benefits that could bring, and other systems are available clearly. And the point being that, you know, when you invest that much, you've also then got to understand how we're going to get value from it and what does it mean. And some of that is about expectation and saying we do expect people to look at the data, to use the data, to input the data well, because that's how we get the benefit. This is public money, blah, 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 blah. So I'm a bit that you have to provide what Liz says is the ability for individuals to upskill in these areas, but it should be part of a deal with members of staff that this is what it is to be part of this organisation now. This is the way that we run healthcare, and frankly, because the absence of it means that we are less safe as an organisation, there is a moral obligation here as well. Oh, and by the way, I dream of being 52. I'm not going to tell you how old I am, so I've got no sympathy for Ray claiming to be 52.
Well, let the youth take over then, Mike, and I'll pull in some of your.
I'll hand over to the youth of today.
Great news. I'll give you a very quick example, which I think is. Oh, sorry. The first thing I'll say is the culture of the NHS, and there's nobody to blame, but cultures, you know, they grow and they look like a lava lamp, aren't they? They just grow and change and shift. I would suggest strongly that the culture in the NHS we've allowed some people to not engage in certain systems and stuff because we've just that way. They never have. So I'm thinking hard to reach groups that you'll have your own view on what a hard to reach group is. In a large trust that we work with, it was always assumed that estate and facilities and ancillary workers were just not capable, really. You know, they just weren't, and they didn't have the time, and it was different hours and different shit. Just couldn't do it. We put our platform in. Other platforms are available. We put our platform in. And what it showed was not whether people had done, for example, appraisal or not, but their level of interaction with the appraisal process in terms of self-assessment, the level of interaction on a continuous basis with one-to-ones feedback. And we saw a real dip in this. And any OD practitioner out there who's listening to me talk about this, the only thing that data did was made them curious. Good OD practitioners are curious. So the curiosity, which was marked across all the data, led an OD practitioner to go around and say, what is the problem here? 2 issues came out. One, spans of control. They have one person managing 50 people or so. There's no way they could do one-to-ones, and it's just impossible. And they probably knew that anyway, but the culture was, well, it's always been that way, so let's leave it over there. Number 2, everybody could use digital. Everybody, they pull their phones out, Sky Sports, betting apps, lovely. But what they didn't have was access to what they thought was agreed trust access to kit. They bought 10 iPads, they loaded the platform on them. Their appraisal rates went up, including self-appraisal, including manager appraisal, then come together and meeting to agree scores, went up to over 80%. They'd never done it before. Now that's because that's not because the digital platform was fantastic. It was just that easy to use and available. The thing that made that happen was a people, workforce, OD person having that data to hand, being curious, intervening, finding the problem, finding the solution. Off you go. That's what digital can do in a real world. I've got other stories about clinical directors, but I'll leave them for another time.
Thanks, Ray. Okay, so we've got 15 minutes, so I've put in the chat, please put any additional questions that you might have. But there's a question and then a comment from Wayne, so I don't know if you want to come in the room, Wayne, because I've not got a clue what chatbots is, so if you want to come in and share with us what it is you're after. Hi, Wayne.
Hi, yeah. I come from a further education background, and I've only been in the NHS for the last 8 months or so. But one thing that the further education area is moving towards is that instant support that you can get through talking to a chatbot, similar to what you get when you call, say, your energy provider or whatever. And we're looking at using those for either our staff internally, so that they can go on to training and development courses, or they can see when the next quick they can query when the next appraisal's due. So all of that data can be held and then fed back to them, and all they need to do is be able to access it through an app. And I do know that some trusts are looking at chatbots, but I'm just wondering if anybody else has got any information around which platforms they're using. Because the one that we would use in the colleges probably wouldn't be appropriate for where we are.
Okay, so an app called chatbots, are other people using it, or are they using alternatives? So I don't know if you want to put in the chat from your organisation what you might be using, and if Ray, you've got any response to that, or indeed Liz or Mike. Go on, Ray.
Shall I kick off? Yeah, chatbot's a great idea. I think it's really good to, and there's lots out there. I think the really good thing to understand is, again, the mechanics behind the chatbot, what you're using it for, and what the outcome of that is. Because communication is about somebody saying something and somebody receiving it and doing something with it. If it's just a kind of a tennis match of communication, then some chatbots kind of start and end there. I think the algorithms that sit behind the received communication and how that links to the action they then take is the key bit, because then you know whether you can test whether chatbots are working or the style and approach of comms is working, which is a slightly different thing. There is a company out there, a big American company, and again, I'm not affiliated in any way, but I just love them. They acquired a Liverpool company, which is probably why I like them, because the company's called Living Lens. And Living Lens analyzes the data that goes into a chatbot and then comes back with information around, are people happy? It's amazing. They do video stuff as well, where I can do a video thing, and they can do analysis on facial recognition, emotion, and people like Unilever use it to do customer feedback and what it's actually telling them. So chatbot is a great. You remember that tennis match when you were a kid? Boop,
yeah.
Boop. Chatbot is that in terms of comms. It's the sexy stuff behind that I'd really pay the closest attention to, so you can learn from the process of chatbot.
Yeah,
I hope that helps.
We're looking at solving the problem that we have where those simple questions could be resolved. So when is this due? Where do I find this? How do I do that? Then it's those type of questions that would be looking to answer. Those are things that take up the time of somebody on the help desk.
I'd love to talk. Let me put it like this. I'd love to talk to you offline, Wayne. That's all I would say.
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for your contribution there. Thanks, Ray. You showed your age there with the bit, but I remember it as well.
So did you by agreeing.
Yeah. All right. Okay. I'm going to ask Gareth to come in. You got your hand up.
Yeah, I might even get a camera to work this time.
Whee, there he is.
Yeah, it is. No, it's really coming on the back of the comments that were made earlier in that in a previous organisation, when we introduced a digital rostering product, we had a huge resistance when we first mooted it. It actually has a massive advantage for not just the organisation, but for my new organisation, which actually ends up paying from the roster. So in terms of efficiency, the gains are massive. But we kept hitting this barrier about people can't use it, people won't react to it, people won't work with it. And in the end, we just called a bluff and said, okay, let's get them all in the main presentation area which we had for learning. So it's a bit of a theatre kind of a concept, brought a mixture of nurses, healthcare support workers, ancillary staff. Again, ancillary staff wouldn't use their phones to do this. And we actually loaded the software into the system and had the holiday websites loaded side by side, and then challenged the individuals in the theatre to actually look at, well, okay, so this is how you book your holiday online. And of course, they could all get into John, whatever it was, TUI or all those individuals. And now what you can do is request permission to see if you can have that week off. And because the system is set in such a way, they get a quick answer in the main, because the way the system was configured, the first three to ask for that shift would get it on that particular ward. And once you hit the fourth, then you'd have to get permission. And immediately, all the angst and all the resistance that we had completely went away. And it was all because the individuals were fearful of, well, what does this mean? I'm not going to be able to use it. But actually, when you sat them in front of it, I think we were insulting their intelligence a little bit, if I'm honest. And then, the gains that we had were massive. Our biggest barrier ended up being the supervisors. So they were the ones that were, giving us the feedback to say people wouldn't respond to it. Actually, it was their fear of the system, because they were worried about how they were going to manage in a different way that they'd managed since the last 20 years, etc. But once we got the concept across and individuals using it, it moved very, very quickly. And on the back of that, we were then able to use the ESR app, so people could look at their pay slips and all the rest of it. So all the paper pay slips disappeared. So actually, if you can get that embracing of the technology, the gains, on a health board by health board basis are quite massive. So I definitely support the comments that were made earlier and challenge people to have a go.
That's really, really helpful, Gareth, to share that real practical idea about how you get people who you assume aren't digital.
We've got about 110,000 people across NHS Wales that we pay every month, and 100,000 of those do not have a payslip. Right. And that's the difference that's come on the back of it.
Okay. Just on that point, Nikki, the one thing that, I say I work with a lot of people who supply the NHS, everything from pharma, medtech, digital, robotics, etc. And the one thing which I think post-COVID world really demonstrates is that the bandwidth that people have to change practice is much more limited now, partly because they're tired, but also because in the main demand is up, and so I talk to suppliers a lot about, if you got the contract tomorrow, what is your implementation process? How much time and energy have you set aside to train people? How much time do they need? What could you do that really makes it easy for them? Because people are so busy being busy, they can't find time not to implement things that would make them less busy. So I think there's a big obligation here on digital and data platform suppliers, of people who are trying to transform the way in which we do things, whether that's in people, OD, HR, or in clinical practice or whatever, to understand that, they can't just kind of sell something to the NHS. What they've really got to do is understand how they would really support the NHS to adopt that as quickly as they're possible, as efficiently as possible. And you know, that might well have to be priced in, but the point being that bandwidth for change at the moment is a real premium, and it's very difficult if you don't understand that as a supplier and think you're going to get the benefits of just dropping your product in and everything's going to be wonderful and you'll get all the benefits, etc. It's not working like that at the moment.
That's helpful. Thanks, Mike.
I was going to come in with a similar point, Nikki. Actually, I was thinking of some like really great entrepreneurs who have products that can help. I was thinking like Dockerboard, Uplook, and obviously the products are available, but they're embraced by staff. And the people that actually have sort of designed the products, run them, help them to implement in the NHS they know the NHS because they've worked there, they know how difficult it is, they're flexible and they respond to your needs. So I think there is something really important about meeting the NHS where it is and having those people in businesses who can actually do that because they appreciate the constraints, and then you can be successful together. Working on it, and also having sort of willing workforce. I think Dockerboard, Uplook, it's clinicians who want to book shifts. Obviously, there's payment attached to that, so you've got sort of a willing group of people who will make that work as well.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Liz. So we're in the final minutes. So Ray, I want to come back to you in terms of what gifts you've got to give the participants that have stayed the course and listened to this engaging conversation before I then close the session. So over to you, Ray.
In true Oprah fashion, you get a car, you get it. No, nobody gets a car. I'm really sorry. What we've done is we've pulled together, and I'll get, hopefully the HPMA guys can help me get this out to the audience.
Yeah.
We pulled together a very simple to use framework which positions digital in terms of 4 themes, asks a series of 8 to 9 questions that you can ask yourself and just reflect on in the coming days, weeks. And then plot you on a grid of kind of, or you plot yourself on a grid of where you are, where you think you might be digitally in terms of people, from, you know, get digital here now, you know, Star Trek capacity, capability, right through to, you know, not yet, and these are the gaps. And hopefully, with obviously no obligation, hopefully that'll just help you guys think and reflect on where you might be, and then start to have some conversations internally about what you're perceiving some of the gaps to be with digital and people. Because I think the nice thing, going back to the paper, Nikki, the futures paper, is I think a kind of an expectation has been set, and with that expectation, an opportunity for us to go to you to go to your leadership teams with the information of papers here, how to think, and you know, can we start this conversation if it hasn't started already? Thereby we won't miss the boat, hopefully.
That's really helpful, Ray. Thank you. And we will, from HPMA, send out a evaluation. So again, it sounds like we could carry on talking for quite a long time about this topic. So it may be that we want to put additional sessions on for this particular topic. So please fill in your evaluation questionnaire. Any other topics you want us to cover, please feel free to name what they are. A huge thank you to our panel, to Mike, to Liz and to Ray for your time today. It's been really fascinating, really positive comments in the chat, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. And take care, all of you that are experiencing difficult times at the moment. If you need me, I'm here for you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.